United States submarine base at Key West, Florida. A dispatch that quoted President Truman's press secretary, Charles Ross, as saying that President Truman has no knowledge of any secret project by this government that would give substance to the existence of such objects. Ross also said that both the Air Force and the Navy deny that such objects exist.
Hi.
Hi.
You know what? Hey, what's up? My name is Noelle, and I was at Walmart today, unfortunately. But fortunately for me, because they now have their own Walmart brand of vegan ice cream, and it's $3. And I got the salted caramel flavor, and I'm not even fucking kidding you. I had to grab my hand and throw the fucking container because I was like, drop it! I would have finished the whole fucking thing. It was so fucking good.
Was it?
And it's
I'm gonna have to look.
Perfect consistency, because sometimes vegan ice cream is too icy or too hard. This was creamy, luscious, perfect consistency. Flavor was incredible. The caramel swirls were throughout it. Tasted like pure heaven.
That sounds delicious.
That's who I am. And for $3, girl, can't beat it.
And I'm Chelsea. I'm drinking this Santa Claus themed coconut that Noelle and I purchased at Ocean Mart this weekend because I am hungover as fuck. And I'm not saying that to promote a party lifestyle. I'm saying that as I drank a thimble of wine, and this is my life now.
Yeah, God forbid. Chelsea had a glass of wine.
I didn't even have a glass. It was one of those tiny little plastic cups that you can get in California that have the yogurt lid that you peel off.
Oh, that's why, because it was a higher percentage, not our fucking fruit juice.
But I drank maybe a quarter of it. Oh my God. I just can't. I can't handle anything anymore.
I feel that, dude.
So,
speaking of things we can't handle.
Yeah, let's talk about something fun.
Yeah, let's talk about a really light subject.
Yeah.
I just want to say that there's probably a lot of things that we're going to get maybe not wrong, but not 100% right. And that's because looking at the history of the Cold War without a bias of Americana while living in Americana is hard, to say the least. And even when you do find the stories of what we did to our own citizens and people, it still comes with a caveat of this was, but we had reasons, this was justified. And I just don't believe that. And it's really hard because even look at right now, which is why we got here in the first place, which is why we are going on this journey back in time to color the portrait of shit that we are currently in. Because it's all fucking connected. And I think the same struggle of looking back on the Cold War is probably going to be the same struggle future history learners will have when they come back at this time and try to decipher and understand America's role with Israel and the genocide in Gaza and on the Palestinian people. We did such atrocious things, and we've created literal government agencies to cover up the crimes or to give them quote unquote justification. So I just want to also preface that yes, this is all true and accurate information, but it's only a fraction of what happened because resources are so hard to find living in America. So anyway, let's get into it.
Okay.
Sorry if anyone heard me. I'm adjusting on a lazy boy.
Sorry if anyone heard me. I slammed my chair into my desk.
It was just pure chaos there for 1 second.
Well, have you been, I don't want to even derail. We're going to do that thing. Have you been trying to be more when you and I both work from home and I try to be animated to show people I'm listening during meetings. And one of those ways is to scoot forward and go like this with my hands of rest my chin.
No, you just look like an
knuckles.
asshole.
Well, I was trying to like do that and I slammed in, but this is a way that I show in meetings that I'm
Intent.
not on my phone.
Oh, check this out. Don't look at what I just did with my hand there, but
Yeah.
can you tell that I'm on my phone?
No, this is also what I do. Like,
Yeah, because I'll put my phone right next to my camera. So
Mhm.
I'm giving you Fox News Network,
like,
mama.
do you want to know where my phone is right now?
Where? Yep.
Yep,
Dude, look at
yep.
this. Okay, so this is me looking at you texting. There's my phone.
Yeah, I do the same thing. Anyway, so that's why I do that with my hands, because I want people to be like, I'm not fucking around. Like, I am actively listening.
Yeah.
And that's what I was trying to do. I only
you're
do that
trying
with
to
people I
prove a
respect.
Okay, well.
And I was looking at myself in the camera.
Stop.
At that
Yeah, I was
time.
going to say, stop pretending like you respect me, you fucking liar. Oh,
So
boy.
I actually have a picture of Puffin just right behind my computer, and that's what keeps me going.
Cute.
Anyway, so that's what that noise was.
So,
and this is my coconut.
Nothing.
Anyone
Love that.
it?
I
Okay,
love
good.
that. We didn't hear anything. Okay. But we are going to hear is us yap. So, and also I want to apologize if you hear not only leather squeaking, but like the noises of a city. Ty moved and there's like a train track station and motorcycles, and it's like the loudest place I've ever been. So
it's just showbiz, baby.
Yeah,
gotta do it live.
Now you guys know I'm a city girl. Anyway, let's get into it. If there's one thing we've learned during the course of this podcast, it's that we haven't learned anything, or at least learned it from an outside perspective, a perspective outside of the US. We find ourselves asking, why do we send billions of dollars to Israel to fund genocide? Why did we ruthlessly bomb civilians in the Middle East? Why are we so involved with everyone else's shit? And why does talking about shelter, food, water, schooling, maternal and paternal leave, and universal health care as a basic human right get you labeled as a dirty anti-American commie? Before we can get to the part that rhymes with Ronald Hagen, we first must go back to a time once again when dogs were shot into space and you could send your neighbor to jail in what would become a modern day witch hunt. I'm going to move my mic because I fucking hate this. I'm so sorry. I'm not going to look at you, Chelsea.
You know what? I face myself away from my camera and I've never looked back because then I would be looking at the wrong monitor.
Yeah, that's what like my whole thing is. I try to look at you, but like it's just not comfortable. Anyway.
Nah.
World War II ended on September 2nd, 1945, and what would follow was a damn near half-century long power struggle of ideology between the US and its allies versus the Soviet Union and the spread of communism. 4. Korea, Vietnam, Egypt, the UK, France, Hungary, the Republic of Congo, Cuba, Laos, the Dominican Republic, Jordan, Syria, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, Iran, and Iraq, and I am most likely missing some. The war was anything but cold. The overall, the actual war happened there. Just, I don't know if I needed to be like explicit with that. Like actual war and fighting happened there. The overall death toll linked to the Cold War related conflicts and political actions is estimated to be in the range of 10 to 15 million people. This estimate includes direct military and civilian casualties from major wars, deaths resulting from political repressions, and other conflicts influenced by Cold War dynamics. The only thing cold about it was that the US and Russia never directly went toe-to-toe, but instead got the rest of the world involved in what would be referred to as a proxy war.
Okay, so that's a little bit of already a misnomer on what we've been taught, because basically what we've been taught is, it was just a propaganda war, but people were actively dying in this conflict. It just wasn't necessarily our boots on the ground doing it.
Exactly. And like,
okay,
I would even say that with like the hardest asterisk, because what we'll learn later is the same shit we're doing today. Like,
okay,
can we say that we are not Like, it's a war of nouns and verbs and adjectives when we try to say right now, oh, America isn't involved in the like war that Israel is fighting against the Palestinian people. But like we are, because we're funding it and we're giving Israel weapons, right? So I would say if 1 + 1 is 2, then we are also a part of this war, right? Like, and we're on the wrong fucking side.
That's like we're the administration and our varsity team is at another school fighting. We're like, or the school district and a school's fighting. Yeah.
It's like we're still there. We're like, we are the reason why they have bullets and guns and bombs being dropped, period.
And not even probably also a shield from like the UN Council and international law and everything like that.
Like, for sure. So the same thing that we're doing today, which people like to have a back and forth on, like we're not actually involved because we physically don't have boots on the ground, is the same thing that could be said about the Cold War. We were still funding actual death fighting and destruction. We just physically like weren't there. Sure. But if you look at that list of countries, that's a fucking big amount. Like that's not just like 2 countries fighting. That's like like
almost another world war.
Yeah, World War Junior, essentially. Like it's but again, because like we suffer from Americanitis, like our version of history is that there was just a poster war going on.
Yeah.
And the threat of nuclear fallout. Like and that's what we were scared of. Like we didn't even have it on our radar that there were people dying in other countries for it because of us.
Got it.
So anyway, a proxy war is a conflict where 2 opposing countries or parties support combatants that serve their interest instead of waging war directly. This indirect form of warfare typically involves backing different sides in a third-party conflict through financial, military, or political support without engaging directly in the combat themselves. This is what happened in the Cold War. This is what's happening today. Proxy wars often occur in regions where superpowers or rival states seek to extend their influence without triggering a direct confrontation that could escalate into a larger, potentially global conflict. It's very much like, I'm not touching you, I'm not touching you.
Yeah, yeah.
Key characteristics of proxy wars include indirect engagement. Again, the main powers involved do not engage in direct military conflict with each other, but rather support their chosen factions in the conflict zone. Local combatants. The actual fighting is done by local or regional groups who receive support from the external powers. Geopolitical goals. Proxy wars are often driven by strategic, political, or ideological goals of the supporting powers. Economic and military aid. The supporting countries provide various forms of aid, including weapons, funding, training, intelligence, and sometimes personnel to the combatants they support. And by personnel, it's like, you get our strategic, like, war planner. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And avoidance of direct confrontation. By fighting through proxies, the major powers aim to avoid a direct and possibly nuclear confrontation. And they also get to wash their hands clean of guilt, right?
Yeah.
Notable examples of proxy wars during the Cold War era include the Korean War from 1950 to 1953. North Korea, backed by the Soviet Union and China, fought against South Korea, which was supported by the United States and other Western allies. One we all might be a little familiar with, the Vietnam War, because obviously we just covered it, not because you were taught it in American schools.
Yeah.
Which was from 1955 to 1975. North Vietnam, supported by the Soviet Union and China, fought against South Vietnam, which was backed by the United States. The Soviet-Afghan War, 1979 to 1989. The Soviet Union supported the Afghan government against various insurgent groups, which were backed by the US, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, and others. The Angolan Civil War, 75 to 2002. Longer one. The MPLA, backed by the Soviet Union and Cuba, fought against junta, which was supported by the United States and South Africa. And then the Nicaraguan Contra War from 1981 to 1990. The Contras, supported by the United States, fought against the Sandinista, government, which was backed by the Soviet Union and Cuba. Hold on, let me go ahead and give one of those. Thank you so much. I was
Good
just
boy,
flipping
Bear.
off Oliver real quick. That might be. Following World War II, the United States ascended as a dominant force on the world stage, having significant economic, military, and political sway. Meanwhile, on paper, at this time, the Soviet Union stood as one of the victorious Allied powers right next to the US,
Yeah.
but wore the weight of staggering human and material loss from the war, not just from the Nazis and the Nazi occupation, but their own leadership. Prior to and during the war, Stalin's regime conducted purges and repression acts against what they perceived as internal enemies, including political opponents, intellectuals, military officers, and ethnic minorities. The Great Purge of the late 1930s resulted in the execution or imprisonment of millions of Soviet citizens.
Yeah, isn't this where people go like Hitler never killed as many people as Stalin did or whatever? Like
Yeah.
I've heard some apologist stuff here of being like, no, Russia's worse.
Yeah,
It's like it's all pretty fucking bad, guys.
Yeah, it's all pretty bad. If we're talking about numbers, which I'll get into in a second, like you can draw your own conclusions. Those who faced imprisonment were sent into labor camps, where many died due to harsh conditions, starvation, and overwork. These labor camps came known as gulags, or the gulag system, and they were an integral part of Stalin's rule. To its own military, they employed blocking detachments, where they prevented retreats and laid down harsh punishment for perceived cowardice or desertion. This led to significant casualties among Soviet soldiers, many of whom were essentially sacrificed by their own leadership. The total number of Soviet deaths during World War II is often estimated to be between 23 to 30 million people. In comparison to other nations, Chelsea, if you want to read these.
Yeah. Estimates suggest that Germany had around 4.5 to 5.5 million military deaths, 7.5 to 9.5 million civilian deaths, which includes the 6 million Jews that were genocided by the Nazi regime. The United States had around 400,000 military deaths and a relatively low number of civilian casualties, resulting in a total of approximately 400 to 500,000 deaths. The United Kingdom had around 400,000 military deaths and approximately 60,000 civilian deaths, resulting in a total of approximately 460 to 500,000 deaths. And Japan had around 2 to 3 million military deaths and roughly 500,000 to 1 million civilian deaths, resulting in approximately 2.5 to 4 million deaths.
So just to summarize that, or remind, I should say, Soviet deaths are 23 to 30 million.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah. In terms of total casualties, the Soviet Union experienced the highest losses among the major combatants of World War II. And this is where the saying, quote, World War II was won with British intelligence, American steel, and Russian blood comes from.
Yeah.
What we have seen time and time again is that periods of devastation often create a power vacuum. At the Yalta Conference in February of 1945, Allied leaders, which again, remember, Joseph Stalin and the Soviet Union were allies.
Mm-hmm.
This included Stalin, Franklin D. Roosevelt, and Winston Churchill, convened to discuss post-war Europe's reorganization and the division of Germany. The agreements reached at Yalta, while aimed at ensuring peace and stability in the aftermath of the war, effectively granted the Soviet Union significant influence over Eastern Europe, including Poland, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, Romania, and Bulgaria. The Soviets wanted to establish a buffer zone, or friendly neutral zone, of states along its western borders to safeguard against potential future invaders, particularly from Germany. Stalin viewed Eastern Europe as a strategic buffer zone to protect the Soviet Union from perceived Western aggression as well, because while being an ally, Stalin was still fucking paranoid. And honestly, like, kind of rightfully so.
I mean, I would be scared. Like, I mean, America got a pretty, dare I say, badass reputation after they stepped in. And so I bet they could see a pendulum swinging, and they were paranoid that they could be next.
1,000%. I mean, you also have to think that, like, so Stalin came to the meeting, technically a winner on paper, an allied winner on paper, but battered,
lost the most.
Yeah, battered, bleeding, and paranoid as fuck. And
he wouldn't even he had his thumb on his own people.
Yeah, he was losing his mind so goddamn much that he fucking genocided his own civilians.
Yeah.
Fueled by pure paranoia and fear. And he just watched the United States slice up Eastern Europe like a fucking birthday cake at a toddler's birthday party at Chuck E. Cheese.
Yeah.
And even though he was like, hey, yeah, thanks. Awesome, you guys. Appreciate it. We did a great job. High fives all around. That motherfucker went back and was like, the United States is terrifying.
Yeah.
Fuck them. Like, fuck them. They're coming for their peace. So, I mean, was he wrong in a lot of things? Absolutely. Was he wrong in perceiving Western aggression? No. In my humble opinion, as a not very educated person.
He was just as scared of the idea of like Western ideology as we were from communist threat. And I bet the threats were, it's so crazy because like, I don't like some of the things, like, especially now that like communist China does is just absolutely atrocious. But I think that we were not
into the, we're going to get into why it's not really communism what they're doing.
Yeah, it's more.
We'll get there in a sec. We'll get there later.
Dictatorship.
Authoritarianism.
Yeah.
But anyway, you can't. He's a motherfucker, but also like a broken clock is right twice a day.
Yeah, he's a motherfucker, but hearing how bad he feared the old red, white, and blue makes me proud to be an American.
I can't fucking blame him. So yeah. While the Soviet Union had battled against Nazi Germany, internal conflicts exacerbated by the war worsened conditions within the country. It helped increase the already insane amounts of paranoia Stalin felt. And I really can't emphasize how paranoid this motherfucker was. And of course, this paranoia would fuel their own self-destruction pre and mid the war. This paranoia and devastation created a power vacuum and intensified the need for stability and control. And in the cumulative Uno reverse, Stalin was able to take the heat rightfully placed on him and throw it back. A little flip it, reverse it, make it work for you. But this time to the fears of Western influence. Soviet leadership turned to communism. What we will now just say is an authoritarian single-party variant, which is not really communism, but that's a story for later in this episode. As a solution, there is no better way to try and win back the population you decimated by blaming everyone else and toting a system that is working class first to help unify the country again. All the while knowing what you're really selling is total authoritarianism and ego. Driven by ideological fervor and the desire to regain control and save face, the Soviet Union sought to spread communism, particularly, again, its own brand, to Eastern Europe and beyond. The Communist Party's doctrine emphasized proletarian internationalism and envisioned the eventual global triumph of communism, but not just any communism, their communism, which is Stalin-led. Enter the US. To keep it short and sweet, and by not short and sweet, I mean like multiple paragraphs, the Soviets satellite states of allies scared the fuck out of the US. So again, like Chelsea predicted, just as Stalin was paranoid and fearful of the United States, as was the United States paranoid and fearful of the Soviet Union. Combine this with its support for communist movements and governments in Asia, and by that I mean like the Soviet Union's support, the US, at its prime of influence and power, both at home and across the world, was absolutely not fucking having any of it. President Harry Truman felt that we needed a game plan, a way to keep communism from spreading like wildfire, and to protect what we held dear in the good old US of A. So in 1947, Truman signed the Truman Doctrine, outlining how we would offer both economic help and military power to countries feeling the heat from communism. First, it was Greece and Turkey, then others across Europe and Asia. And that's it. Once again, Superman USA saves the world from evil communism. End of episode.
Yay!
Wrong, mama.
Ah, damn it.
Wrong. The Truman Doctrine was the official start of the Red Scare. It required that all federal civil service employees be screened for, quote, loyalty. That's right. In a classic United States move, not only did we take our aggressions out on the world, we took it out on ourselves.
Oh, love that for us.
Classic. The order said that one basis for determining disloyalty would be finding a membership in, affiliation with, or sympathetic association with any organization determined by the Attorney General to be totalitarian, fascist, communist, or subversive, or advocating of approving the forceful denial of constitutional rights to other persons, or seeking to, quote, alter the form of government of the United States by unconstitutional means, end quote. All this to say, there should be something really fucking terrifying by one person or one small faction or group of people playing judge, jury, and executioner by a loosely defined assumption of perception.
I think this even bleeds into how you sometimes see people react to protesters today. Because you see things like, oh, if I catch you stomping like an American flag, I'm going to shoot you because that's an act of war. I feel like that's like an older mentality that came about with this kind of like McCarthyism thinking.
Yes.
Of like, you're either with us or against us.
Yeah.
And then you and I come from like the younger generation where it's like, I don't know, that's kind of punk rock free speech. I might not do it, but I'm also not threatened by you doing it.
Yeah.
It's speech. Like, literally not bothered, right?
Exactly.
And I feel like you just saying that, the whole like you have to have like affiliation with the United States and like it's blood in, blood out is wild. Like you have to fly our colors or we'll fucking come get you. Crazy.
Yeah, and that's pretty much it. Like the Truman Doctrine, I know that Harry Potter sucks and my brain is like misfiring. But it reminds me of like Harry Potter's tribunal of like the I shall not tell lies.
With Umbridge. Harry Potter doesn't suck. J.K. Rowling sucks.
But who created? It doesn't, you know what I'm saying? It sucks. We shouldn't use it, but I'm going to in this because it makes me think of that.
Yeah.
Because and we see it today, but this is definitely where it started with the Truman Doctrine and what would then become second wave Red Scare, which is McCarthyism, which we'll get to in a second. Is this like, it's different when you do it, but American when I do it. So like the whole free speech thing, right? Like live and die by the red, white, and blues. Like we have freedom of assembly. We have freedom to protest. We have media freedom and we have the right to free speech. And that could also mean, and I shouldn't mean that, it does mean both I love America and democracy should rule the world. And also, fuck America. I hope it burns into hell and democracy is garbage. Like both of those things are protected.
Right.
By like my right to have freedom of speech. Just like protesting to say teachers should have guns in schools is protected, just like protesting to say civilians shouldn't have automatic firearms is protected. But
Right.
the difference is that there's one side that considers themselves like red-blooded true Americans that say no, not when you do it like that. It's only protected when it benefits America and is pro-America. But when it's not, then it shouldn't be protected. It's cherry picking.
Yeah, it's the people who have like "Let's Go Brandon" stickers on their cars. But if you like kneel during the national anthem, you're an atrocity. Or like, the fuck Biden flags. But then if you like watch drag queens on TV, the pearls be clutched.
Exactly.
It's a circle. The people who worry about it and have "Let's Go Brandon" stickers on their cars is a circle. Yeah,
it's hypocrisy, it's cherry picking.
Mm-hmm.
It's while saying they're the most American, they're touting the most un-American ideology.
Yeah. Dare I say they're touting some real totalitarian dictatorship mentality.
Yeah, some would say if you turn right far enough.
It's coming from inside.
Yeah, exactly. So that ideology started with the good old Truman Doctrine and the first wave of the Red Scare. Here are some examples of organizations that were targeted as anti-loyalist. The National Lawyers Guild, or NLG. The NLG were accused of being a communist front with zero evidence. While some members were indeed sympathetic to, quote, communist causes, such as working class citizens being paid fair wages, the organization as a whole focused on progressive legal reforms and civil rights. Which brings me to the next one, the Civil Rights Congress, or CRC. The CRC was a leftist organization involved in civil rights advocacy, and while it included members who believed in, quote, communist ideology, which was defined as, quote, revolutionary change throughout gradual reform, end quote, its primary work was on social justice issues. Then we have the Joint Anti-Fascist Refugee Committee, which seems like, hey, they're anti-fascist too, just like you guys say you are. But the JAFRC was targeted during the Red Scare, and while some members were self-proclaimed communists advocating for egalitarianism,
I'm trying to help you. Egalitarianism.
I just had a fucking stroke.
It's all right.
Many were simply focused on aiding refugees.
Okay, so completely normal behavior.
Yeah,
got it.
Congress of American Women, or CAW.
I love it. Sorry.
What?
I just like that name. That's just a good fucking name.
Congress
Who you with?
Women?
They're like,
CAW.
There's a lady like walking down the road and she's wearing pants and a fucking black van comes up and they wrap her up in a flag and they throw her in the back and they're just beating the shit out of her. And they're like, who do you work for? And right before she goes under and gives in, she goes, and just squirts blood all over their faces. Just a good fucking name.
Yeah, I would like to imagine that's what happened.
I'm sure that's what happened.
So CAW had connections to leftist and communist individuals, but like many organizations, its primary focus was on women's rights and social reforms, which were considered sympathetic views to communist ideology. Then we had the American Committee for Protection of Foreign Born, which its focus was on defending immigrants' rights.
Okay.
And then, last but not least, the United Electrical, Radio, and Machine Workers of America. The UE.
That sounds like the most American one. That's the most American one.
You would think. The UE had members and leaders who believed in communist ideology, like solidarity of working class people.
Mm-hmm.
But it was also a legitimate labor union fighting for workers' rights. And honestly, any work or labor union and civil rights group was targeted.
Yeah.
Well, we love them.
They would be targeted.
But they were targeted significantly.
Yeah. Because that didn't fit into the agenda of hoarding all the money for yourself.
Exactly.
Okay.
Now, the U.S. wasn't about to tackle taking down communism solo. In 1949, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, or NATO, was formed. It brought together Western European nations, Canada, and the US under one roof. Originally, it was a post-World War II deal aimed at picking up the pieces and hopefully stopping history from repeating itself. But fast forward, and NATO's become more than just a patch-up job. It's a way to safeguard Western interests, keep the peace, and make sure the ghosts of authoritarianism and totalitarianism stay firmly in the past. Mm-hmm. And by that, I mean keep Western ideology at the forefront.
Yeah, and by that, we mean be a totalitarian on Western interests. Got it.
Exactly. I think the Batman quote of "You either die a hero or live long enough to see yourself become the villain" is the saying the US will etch on its tombstone. Because the US said copy paste to Soviet tactics, not just against the Soviets themselves, but its own people. The early years of the Cold War were marked by a period of intense anti-communist hysteria, which we have now dubbed the Red Scare. Senator Joseph McCarthy and others led aggressive campaigns to root out suspected communists and sympathizers from all levels of society, including government, academics, civil rights activists, and the entertainment industry, and honestly, just your neighbor that pissed you off. And before I go into this next bit, do any of those targeted groups sound familiar? Like we covered them above with the same groups that Stalin had picked off himself within his own country and people?
Yeah, interesting.
Might see some parallels there. Anyway, here's a quick story. The House Un-American Activities Committee, which was one of many committees formed by the Fed and funded by the Fed to suss out what they considered sympathizers and communists, began, and this is where I think of like the Harry Potter fucking like Umbridge. Anyway, yeah. That's what I imagine. I imagine like a fucking author or poet comes in and he's just like, they're making him carve into his arm, and a woman in pink is like, a woman in pink who looks like Marjorie Taylor Greene is like, "You're not fucking American." And
yeah,
I just right. Like that's what I see. So
yeah,
anyway,
I see it.
The House Un-American Activities Committee began an investigation into the Hollywood motion picture industry. In September 1947, the HUAC subpoenaed 79 individuals on a claim that they were injecting communist propaganda into their films, like subversively, subliminally.
Okay.
From that group, 41 of those individuals attended voluntarily and became known as, quote, friendly witnesses.
They're like, this is crazy. I'll never get convicted of this.
Even worse.
Oh, no.
During their testimony, they continued to name more and more people whom they accused of holding views sympathetic to communism. The proof? Just word of mouth. This could be anything, even something as trivial as stating the price of bread is too high. The claims were never substantiated, but the additional names dropped would be charged with contempt of Congress when they refused to answer questions about their membership in the Screenwriters Guild, which they considered a Communist Party sympathizing group, and or because of that, considered them active members of the Communist Party. The committee demanded they admit their political beliefs and name names of other communists. 19 of them refused to cooperate, and due to illness, scheduling conflicts, and exhaustion from the chaotic hearings, only 10 appeared before the committee.
And then they pressed the rest of them to death, and before they died, they said, "More wait."
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then they said, "Burn the witch." They became known as the Hollywood 10. And just to clarify, with those, the 41 people who were friendly witnesses, what that means is, and there's probably a term for this that's just out of my mind right now, but it's not just falsified testimonies. It's the whole, like, if you just give us the names of 4 other communists, we'll let you go.
Okay.
And like, you could either cooperate and give the names of 4 people, and then you literally get to go home, or you get charged with contempt of court.
Oh,
right?
so it was blackmailed, extorted witnesses.
Yeah, it was
friendly.
exactly. It was like extortion. So like,
yeah,
immediately the knee-jerk reaction is to be like, fuck you guys. But the other one is like, this is how we get falsified testimonies. And we have, I think of like the West Memphis 3 and putting maybe the like slower kid with a lower IQ in an interrogation room for fucking 12 hours and pressing him. And eventually you just say, yes, I did it, just to get the fuck out of there. It's the same thing here, that they were like, you know what? Fuck it. I have been interrogated for 6 fucking hours straight. I'm dehydrated. I'm hungry. I have a family. I have a job and career. Here's 4 fucking people. Let me go.
Yeah.
So that's what was happening there. But from that original group, 10 refused. They said, fuck you. Fuck you. I'm not a communist, and none of the people in the Screenwriters Guild are fucking communists. Like, fuck you. And those were the Hollywood 10.
The real Americans of the group.
Yeah, and they claimed that the First Amendment to the United States Constitution clearly gave them the rights to do this. Like, they took the whole, like, because imagine saying, hey, I think we're being, like, scammed. I think, like, we should be advocating for, like, better pay and better wages and better rights, and we shouldn't have to work fucking 14-hour days with no breaks, and, like, children shouldn't be forced onto movie sets for 12 hours with no education. Like, all of that shit would have been considered like communist rhetoric and like communist sympathizing ideology, and would have gotten you labeled as a communist or a communist sympathizer.
Well, even now you get labeled socialist. Like, that's almost the new communist label that people are clinging to. Yeah,
they've braided them all into being the same thing. And so they took the whole, like, sure, you could have caught me saying that, and guess what? It's my First Amendment right to be able to do that and say that. And then they were like, no, fuck you. Because again, in this time period, in this form of ideology during the Red Scare, and as we see today, it's the whole, like, it's okay when I do it, but not when you do it. If you're not using your First Amendment to tote the power and prodigy that is American democracy, then you don't get to fucking have it, right?
Right, yeah.
So the HUAC and the courts during appeals disagreed, and they were found guilty of contempt of Congress. They were sentenced, fined, and blacklisted. Of the 10, one was Dalton Trumbo, known for movies such as Roman Holiday and Spartacus. So these weren't just fucking random people.
Yeah.
And Ring Lardner Jr., who would later go on to create an American classic, MASH. While most were dismissed by their labels, some continued on working using fake names. And with this and the Un-American Committee, we officially dub the second wave of the Red Scare as McCarthyism. McCarthyism is characterized by baseless accusations, blacklisting, and public hearings, resulting in the persecution of thousands of individuals, many of whom lost their jobs, reputations, and livelihoods. Being part of a union became a sign of communist sympathy. Showing up to a civil rights protest could mark you as a communist loyalist. There were federally funded loyal security reviews, not just for government workers, but anyone. The U.S. government conducted extensive surveillance and intelligence gathering operations on its own citizens, particularly those deemed subversive or disloyal. And again, just a pause here. Does any of this sound familiar? Like surveilling its own citizens. I don't know. Might sound like something the fucking Soviets were doing.
The KGB do
exactly.
That. It's crazy too, because I think this is the time where you started to get the CIA operatives who would infiltrate college groups. And get them taken down from the inside.
Girl, I've got a juicy little one for you in a few seconds.
Let's do it.
I think we forget. I think we fucking forget where something was born from and why. So anyway, The FBI's counterintelligence program targeted civil rights leaders, activists, and political dissidents using covert tactics to disrupt and discredit their movements. FBI operations included infiltration, wiretapping, harassment, and the dissemination of false information, contributing to a climate of fear and mistrust within affected communities. So again, this is like the infiltration, covert ops.
Mm-hmm.
But the hysteria of communism in the US was too big of a job for just the FBI. And it was also in 1947, with Truman's National Security Act of 1947, that the CIA was born.
Motherfuckers, cunts in action, cowards in action.
The CIA,
the CIA killed Kennedy, the last American president who was actually for the people and not for the bank.
And honestly, that's the most CIA thing they could have done, because the CIA was literally born of McCarthyism, Red Scare bullshit.
Yeah.
Like, that's why it was fucking created. During the Cold War, the CIA engaged in a number of controversial and unethical activities as part of their efforts to counter communist influence and promote U.S. interests globally. Here are some of the most notable examples that I'm going to make Chelsea read. We might hear some fan favorites on this list.
The coup d'etat of political interference. So in Iran, 1953, the CIA orchestrated Operation Ajax, which led to overthrow of the Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh of the reinstatement of the Shah. This coup was motivated by fears that Mossadegh would nationalize Iran's oil industry and move Iran closer to the Soviet Union. In Guatemala, 1954, Operation PBS Success resulted in the overthrow of democratically elected President Jacobo Arbenz.
Great job.
Thank you. Who had implemented land reforms that threatened U.S. business interests. This coup led to decades of political instability and violence in Guatemala. Chile in 1973, the CIA supported a military coup that ousted President Salvador Allende, a socialist. President Augusto Pinochet's subsequent dictatorship was marked by severe human rights abuses.
So that was like they took out the elected guy that everyone liked and put in their own, the U.S. supported guy who ended up being a fucking horrific dictator. Anyway, go on.
Next was fan favorite MK Ultra.
Mm-hmm.
This program aimed to develop mind control techniques through experiments on unwitting subjects. And these experiments included the administration of drugs, most notably LSD, psychological manipulation, and other forms of torture. And many of the subjects suffered long-term harm, and the program's full extent remains partially classified. MK Ultra is a fun one because this was a conspiracy that is no longer a conspiracy because it was ultimately proved true. Support for repressive regimes and insurgencies, so the Vietnam War. The CIA supported various right-wing dictatorships and paramilitary groups in Latin America, such as El Salvador and Nicaragua, where they backed the Contras against the Sandinista government. And these actions often led to widespread human rights abuses and civilian casualties. Another fan favorite is Operation Mockingbird. And this program sought to influence domestic and foreign media. The CIA covertly funded and manipulated journalists and news organizations to disseminate propaganda and promote U.S. government perspectives. Next, we had the Bay of Pigs invasion in 1961, where the CIA planned and executed an unsuccessful invasion of Cuba by Cuban exiles aimed at overthrowing Fidel Castro. And the failure of the invasion was a major embarrassment for the United States, and it actually strengthened Castro's position.
Yep.
There were assassination attempts where the CIA made multiple attempts to assassinate foreign leaders, most famously Fidel Castro.
They wouldn't give it up.
You know what? Good for him. I don't know if I should say that. Do we like Fidel Castro? No, we don't.
I mean, this is another, do we have the full story or do we have the westernized propagandist version?
Yeah. Then there were covert operations in Africa, where the CIA was involved in these operations, including the assassination of Congolese leader Patrice Lumumba in 1961. The agency supported anti-communist factions and in various countries, which often exacerbated conflicts, which contributed to the instability. Next, we have Operation Gladio. And this was a NATO quote unquote stay behind operation in Europe during the Cold War. The CIA and other Western intelligence agencies supported secret armies that, in some cases, engaged in terrorism and subversion to counter communist influence. You want to know another fucking funny one?
What?
Is that when the United States would do some of these invasions on these countries, they would drop comic book propaganda. And some of this you can still get your hands on, but they would send down propaganda showing Americans coming in and murdering soldiers, like local soldiers, and having little kids run up to hug the Americans and saying, like, thank you for saving me, like, thank you for rescuing me. And this went all the way up into even Ronald Reagan with Reagan's Heroes, where they would take presidents' heads and put them on bulked out rock bodies. But it was crazy the amount of propaganda that even the comic book industry took part in. It's really quite gross.
Oh yeah. If you wanted a piece of the money pie, all you had to do was push out pro-American propaganda. It didn't matter if it was TV, movies, comics, television, literature, poetry, fashion, even hairstyles, obviously, like makeup, like everything became a propaganda, like a form of propaganda to be pro-America. So despite the United States' professed commitment to democracy and freedom, obviously the above bullshit occurred on its order and under its order. As well as racial segregation and discrimination persisting in many parts of the country during the Cold War era, people of color faced systematic racism, including segregation in schools, housing, and public facilities. The civil rights movement, which was gaining momentum during this time through the 50s and 60s, faced violent resistance and repression from both state and non-state actors. Civil rights leaders such as Martin Luther King Jr. were surveilled, harassed, and targeted by government agencies, citing reasons of being a communist sympathizer. So this is actually something that I thought was like an interesting thing to chew on, because we often ask ourselves, like, how could you be a part of that history and just sit idly by, right? Like, there were people who were obviously violent in their hatred towards people of color and the demand for continued segregation. And then there were people who I think are the most confusing to look back on through a historical lens, which are the people who turned a blind eye and said nothing.
Right.
And I feel like when we talk about the civil rights movement, we forget to look at the whole historical context. We just seem to focus in on that certain, those 5 to 10 years, right? Where we finally saw civil rights protests being screened on TVs. And it was kind of like a veil was lifted. But there was also this undercurrent of ideology that you could almost say, I'm not a racist, but what they preach is sympathetic to communist ideology.
Yeah.
And it's almost like tricking themselves, right?
It's a little dog whistly. Yeah.
Yeah, oh, I'm not racist, but they're communists. Because of the way that they protest and the things that they protest about and the way that they speak. And you know what I mean? It has nothing to do with race. It has nothing to do with blah, 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 you know?
I'm not racist. I just love to play that song. Try that in a small town. Or I don't hate trans people. I just want to keep pedophiles out of bathrooms.
Exactly. Yeah. It's the same type of like dog whistle. It's like how they skirt around like, oh, I'm not racist. I don't have a problem with black people, but they're all fucking communists. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
like,
right.
Be fucking for real. So
it's ways for them to get around social issues at the time by making it about something else.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So just interesting to think about. The Cold War arms race between the United States and the Soviet Union led to extensive nuclear testing, both above and below ground in various parts of the country. These tests resulted in widespread environmental contamination and posed significant health risks to nearby communities. Downwinders, which is the name given to residents living near nuclear test sites in the Intermountain West, primarily in Arizona, Nevada, New Mexico, and Utah.
Woo! Finally get named for something.
Recognition. But also in Oregon, Washington, and Idaho, experienced higher rates of cancer, birth defects, and other health problems due to exposure of radioactive fallout. Despite growing public awareness and protest, the testing of nuclear weapons continued for decades.
I just saw in a Reddit thread of like chilling photographs, and there's one around this time of nuclear testing where there's some teenager girls in the water, and it shows one of them like leaning against like a log going like
with her tongue out.
Yeah, with her tongue out, like she's catching snow on her tongue. She was the only one in that photo to make it to age 30. Because what they didn't know at that time, that what was falling from the sky was nuclear fallout from the testing, and it was warm, and they didn't know what it was, so they were catching it on their tongues like you would with snow.
God, that's so dark and twisted.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
isn't that gnarly?
That's fucking gnarly.
Yeah.
Do you have that? Could be the picture for this episode.
Yeah, I'll try to find it.
You have to find it. So. Let's try to unpack this all, okay? Why is the US so afraid of communism? First, we need to understand economic systems in general. To comprehend why the United States harbors such apprehension towards communism, we must first examine the evolution of economic systems throughout history. Feel free, Chelsea, to use your degree at any point here.
Okay, I'm also looking up that picture, so you got to give me a second.
Okay, great. You could do that. You do that instead.
I'm not exactly looking at it, but I found the picture, so just stand by. It's just not saving in a good format.
No, it's
sometimes
fine.
You try to drag from the no, we got to talk about it. Sometimes you try to drag from the internet, and then it saves as like a web page.
Yes,
like a fucking image file.
Yeah,
that's the real war. That's the real Cold War.
Yeah, still beating on today.
Yeah, anyway, I sent you that picture.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
You have an anthropology degree.
I do, yeah.
I don't think that's actually going to help here, so.
I don't think that will help. Where are we on why is the United States so afraid of communism?
Yeah, we're going to talk about feudalism for a second, but it doesn't matter. Yeah,
I can actually probably answer this, but let's learn about feudalism.
Okay. The oldest system, feudalism, delineated society into landowners and serfs, sealing one's fate at birth. However, as industrialization and urbanization arose, imperialism came to be, characterized by colonial exploitation for economic gain. This era was followed by, I don't know why I was really trying to thesaurus.com it up, but this era was followed by capitalism.
Oh, ascendancy of capitalism?
Yeah, but ascendancy is like a dumb. That's like a dumb.
Yeah.
It didn't like ascend. It doesn't matter. I just was really trying to juice it up.
It's like Undertaker, where he just rises up.
I know, but like that's not really what happened. It doesn't matter.
I had a dream that you, me, and Typhoid Taylor were at an old-fashioned soda pop counter, and Taylor and I ascended in the rapture. You didn't. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, your internal monologue and thoughts really.
I didn't tell you because I felt bad.
I don't want to go, girl. Let me raw on here. Anyway, I don't like ascendancy. Like it didn't ascend. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, that's fair.
It was rooted in capitalism was rooted in the Protestant Reformation's belief that the purpose of life was to be happy. Tie that in with Enlightenment thinkers like John Locke and Adam Smith's, or I should say, like John Locke and Adam Smith, who wrote The Wealth of Nations, and you're cooking with the peanut oil that happiness comes from earning money. In this system, a distinction emerged between the bourgeoisie, the rich industrialists who own the means of production, and the proletariat, the workers, the working class, who are laboring for wages set by the industrialists. In Germany, Karl Marx started to have notes and critiques of capitalism's parallels with feudalism and imperialism, the two that came before it. Contrary to popular belief, Marx didn't invent communism, but contributed to its lineage, which is rooted in ancient societies and 18th century thinkers like Thomas More. Marx identified several fundamental flaws within capitalism. Private ownership of the means of production, leading to the exploitation of labor, the extraction of surplus value from workers, perpetuating inequalities, the commodification of labor, alienating workers from the products of their labor, and capitalism's, you can say that.
Susceptibility.
There we go.
To economic crises.
To economic crisis and class conflict. Jesus Christ.
It's all right, kid. You're doing good. It gets hard towards the end, man.
It gets hard towards the end.
Pages of single space, black on white typeface.
And then say capitalism's crisis of class conflict 3 times.
Yeah, no.
It's not going to fucking happen. Marxism so what Karl Marx came up with is what we would call Marxism. The actual, if we were to put it in the same, like feudalism, capitalism, Marxism. Communism is an ideology. It's a set of beliefs. It's not an economic structure.
Mm-hmm.
Marxism would be the economic structure. Marxism laid the groundwork for understanding and critiquing capitalism, emphasizing the inevitability of class struggle and advocating for a classless society. However, the term communism became synonymous with Karl Marx's ideas just because, like, to simplify it, it's nuanced historical roots and interpretations. In his,
it almost feels like the Book of Mormon versus Latter-day Saints, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and then Mormons. You know what I mean? It seems like a little bit more association became the simplified term for it.
Yeah, and I would also say maybe even like a rough translation, because so 1848, Karl Marx published the Communist Manifesto. And the reason why he did this was like the use of the term communism as in like a community-led organization, like the commune of us, the people, like the People's Manifesto, the People's Guide, right? Like it's more so that. And it's a critique of capitalism.
Yeah.
It was not like the Communist Manifesto didn't say like, fuck capitalism, like, fuck. It basically said like, hey, I actually think this is like one of the best versions we have so far, but these are the things that if you continue doing, you're going to have like a revolt of the working class, because there's going to be such a gap between the upper and lower class. Like if you continue on this way, you're going to disintegrate. There's going to be a moment in time where you have a massive, powerful middle class.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then there's going to be a time where that middle class disintegrates and it becomes the top versus the bottom. And if you continue on that way, like you're going to have a violent revolution. But you just need to change these things, right? Like I think what you're doing is right. Obviously, like we need to contribute to society and but like this is how you could do it without like hoarding wealth, essentially.
Yeah.
So,
do you remember at the fucking Trump protests for that kid in a blue button-up shirt with a white collar and tan pants was yelling at us to read the Communist Manifesto. And we were like, we've read it. Do you know who wrote it? And he went, "Bleh." Like he pulled his chin so far into that starched little collar of his. I'd like to think that he slit his own artery when he did that and died, because I didn't see him again for the rest of the night.
Yeah, he went home to Google it.
All I can think of is just this blonde Aryan head with that fucking stark white collar and blue button-up shirt. You know exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I know.
It's like
exactly.
a Brock Turner clone. Yeah. It probably was Brock Turner, the fuck.
Motherfucker. But anyway, for Marx, the word communist was used to describe the vision for a society where resources are shared collectively. There is now a distinction between communism in action and what we now refer to as Marxism, and what I would even say the majority refers to as communism.
Mm-hmm.
No matter what it started as and what it became, it was a threat to capitalism and a threat to those in power, which led the US and the USSR to be locked in a battle of ideologies, aka the Cold War. However, the Soviet Union's authoritarian regime, masked as communism, misrepresented Marx's vision, leading to misconceptions and exacerbating fears in the West of the Big Red Scare. Despite the US's victory in the Cold War, that's what you want to call it, and the prevalence of capitalism, the critiques of capitalism persisted. Income inequality, the exploitation of workers, the concentrations of wealth and power continued to plague societies worldwide, not just ours. And of course, what is funny is to look at what the USSR was doing. The Soviet Union was governed by a single ruling party, the Communist Party, which exercised tight control over all aspects of society, including the economy, media, education, and politics. Decision-making was highly centralized, with power concentrated in the hands of party leaders and government officials rather than distributed among its people. In Marx's theory, communism is characterized by workers' ownership and control of the means of production. But as states above, in the Soviet Union, the state controlled all the major industries and enterprises, with little to no input from workers themselves. While the ideology of communism emphasized the empowerment of the working class, in practice, workers had limited influence over decision-making processes. The Soviet regime was notorious for its political repression, censorship, and suppression of dissent. Opposing parties and independent voices were banned, and political dissidents were often imprisoned, exiled, or executed. The state's monopoly on power meant that alternative political ideologies were not tolerated. Despite the rhetoric of equality being a main point of communism, or what we would specify now as Marxism, the Soviet Union had a rigid hierarchical structure with a small ruling elite enjoying privileges and perks, while the rest of the population faced restrictions and shortages. The bureaucracy was bloated and inefficient, leading to widespread corruption and nepotism, turning itself into something that mirrored capitalism in modern-day America more than anything.
Seriously, like, read off those last two sentences, like a small ruling elite, bloated and insufficient, like bureaucracy of corruption and nepotism.
Yeah, the concentration of power, the concentration of money, nepotism, like it's like what we call communism is actually like authoritarianism and totalitarianism. And what we call modern day democracy is a kissing cousin of that.
Yeah.
Because like when Stalin did like a flip it and reverse it, make it work for you, right? He did a smoke and mirrors. He said, you guys, fuck, it's so fucking bad, you guys. Holy shit. Totally not me though. Like totally not me. Literally pillaging and lighting on fire like our crops and harvests, and like that was totally not me. And it's the Western forces and Western ideology. And like, you know what's really going to save us? Like, if we just get together if we just get together and like I see you guys in the fields and in the mines and in the steel industry, like you guys are it, like you are the backbone of this country and you're gonna like get us back on track. Like it's all fucking you. Like I'm all in on you guys. Like this is how we fucking do it. Meanwhile, he's like rubbing his little hands together and he's going like, gonna get so fucking rich. I'm gonna get so fucking rich and fat and powerful. And like, I want to rule the fucking world. Like, it's what I deserve. Like, it's what I'm gonna do. Like, that's what he did.
Yeah.
It was never communism.
Right.
It was always like authoritarian, totalitarian, fascist, like whatever you want to call it, dictatorship. Like, it was always that, but it was masked to the people of like, this is how we work for you guys. Like, I'm fucking here for you. I love you guys. I love you so much. Like, that's what it was marketed as.
Yeah.
And like, that's where the miscommunication happened. And that's what's so unfortunate about like where we stand right now, where we have the biggest class divide, where we have the biggest hoarding and concentration of power and money, almost to a rate that is unfathomable, amounts that we cannot even comprehend, while we still have children dying from food insecurity and the like lack of clean drinking water, and we still have like massive amounts of the population without homes and shelter and clothing. And then we also have billionaires with a fucking B building their own personal spaceships to go to the fucking moon. Like, it's dystopian. It's as dystopian as it ever gets. But because of what happened during the Cold War era and the Red Scare and McCarthyism, and what happened when we bought the same lie that Stalin was giving to the people of the Soviet Union, when we bought it as well, and then disguised it so that people in power, property owners, industrialists, the rich, the wealthy, the powerful could continue to hoard that and gain that and maintain that. Like, that's why we can't talk about social programs without being labeled like a socialist, a communist, a Marxist, a leftist, a whatever, right? Like, the fear of communism, because what did we see play out? And that's what like people use, quote unquote, people use as like the example. Well, look at Russia. Well, look at North Korea. Like, look at Cuba. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, you think, look at what communism did. It starves its people. It kills its people. It brainwashes its people. It tortures its people. That's what happens when you give everyone everything without having to work for it. Like, that is a blatant lie and bastardization of an ideology that was created to not give everyone everything for free, but to give everyone a fair fighting chance, to objectively look at the earth and humanity and say, like, look at all of this abundance we have naturally. How can we make sure that everyone gets a piece of it while still having opportunities, right? Like, true communism and Marxism isn't saying capitalism, ban it. It's saying this is how we keep a structure that learns and grows and improves, but also safeguards and protects and ensures that people, just by being born on planet Earth, have like basic fundamental rights to just exist, which should include shelter, food, water, healthcare, and then you would be pressed to say education.
Well, that's where a little bit earlier you were like, use the anthropology degree. And if I learned anything about the United States, was that everything that they do is to actually hoard the wealth or hoard their ideological beliefs to serve the wealthy. So, for example, they would reject communism because it doesn't serve the wealthy in the same way, like you can see even in the way our government is structured is we have one pinnacle person who's in charge, which would be the president. You can even see that that implies that there's always going to be man on top. Mm-hmm. And we do that with our primary religion, with Christianity. We have one God on top that mimics how our government goes. And when you put your government in the same formatted position as your religion, you're lining yourself up to be whoever is at the top gets the glory. And it's that exact same way when it breaks down on class. So the middle class disappearing, I know that people want to blame that on, they can literally blame it on anything, but ultimately it's because all we have done, no matter what financial or political system you want to subscribe to, is cater to the wealthy. I mean, look at how many people are defending billionaires' rights to not have to pay their fair share of taxes. Yeah. They're like, well, then they'll go to other countries. And I'm like, go to Russia, you fucking piece of shit. Don't let the door hit you on the way out. Yeah. It's really wild that it's the same reason why the United States had put so much emphasis on college until just recently. And that was because they wanted to delay entry into the workforce and they wanted to rob people of experience. So then you get out of college and you realize, fuck, experience talks, education walks. Yeah. And now that we're starting to kind of see Gen X putting a little bit, or Gen Z putting kind of a stop to that and being like, well, then I'm just not going to fucking work, babes. Or I'm going to jump from job to job to job and just continue doing all of these lateral moves. But the second you don't treat me right, I'm gone. And then all of a sudden we're realizing, oh, fuck, like we are the power of the workforce. And the new thing now is vilifying Gen Z on being lazy when they're just not, they're, you know what I mean? It's like, oh, I had to get surgery. Or you look on anti-work Reddit where you see these bosses treating their workers terribly. And they're like, oh, okay, I just won't come anymore. And they're so absolutely gooped because they've always been the priority in their small little kingdom. And it's not the case anymore. Yeah. It's just intense though. Like, you don't think that these things that existed before our time would really dive in, but really we're not seeing the Red Scare in terms of communism, but now we're seeing kind of like the Soviet scare of political or just social responsibility being like totally mislabeled as free handouts. Yeah, exactly. I think like I would even argue that the Red Scare never ended. And it's almost why you can't find like a date, like at least the witch trials have a date of when it started and when it ended. Yeah. You can't really find an end date to the Red Scare or McCarthyism because much like the propaganda it pumped out, it adapted and it adjusted. And I would say that it never went away. It became like a premium brand of propaganda. So much so that just having like a thought in the modern age of 2024 that like, hey, it should be a given right to like have healthcare. And then to like immediately say like, that's fucking communist, that's fucking socialist, that's fucking handouts, you're fucking lazy, get a fucking job. They say all that while living in a society that benefits like pharmaceuticals and financially profits off of internal stock trading on pharmaceuticals and the medical and medicine industry, or the fact that like doctors get bonuses dependent on what medications they push, and companies will put high dollar values on medications that are life-saving, like the greatest example being insulin. Knowing that like, what are you going to do? Die? Yeah. And then it's the same thing whenever we've talked about it before, whenever there's a mass shooting that hits the, national media circuit, they'll talk about it's a mental health crisis. And then these companies that push these pharmaceuticals will back members of Congress to say, hey, push these pharmaceuticals so we can help with the mental health crisis. And guess who is on the board for these pharmaceutical companies, if not representatives from the NRA? Yeah. because it benefits the NRA to go, yep, mental health crisis. Let's
Yep.
back these people to back these pharmaceuticals so that we can keep getting money in our pockets and everybody wins. And everybody's guilty on it, both sides. Like anytime somebody says it's a mental health crisis, I know that they've been a fucking sellout. It's not a mental health crisis.
No.
It's a fucking culture crisis because we are prioritizing value of men having sex with women. And you know what I mean? But that's a different, totally different political thing. But it's like you can buy your way into law if you have enough money and you see it with, I mean, that's like the most insane part of our entire infrastructure, that you can buy votes. And they claim Russia's doing it. It's like, you're fucking doing it, babes.
Yeah, claiming that like Russia interferes with our elections. Meanwhile, like they interfere with everyone's elections. And by there, I mean like we, the United States government, by their own admission.
I mean, did we not just rush our own capital? I mean, come on. Who's interfering with elections the most, if not our own boots on the ground?
And the thing that you almost have to like applaud the oligarchy of the United States, the fucking 5 raccoons in a trench coat that own everything in this country, is that they took the propaganda-ism-itis of the Cold War and into Reaganism and said, like, we're perfecting this. And it truly is, because what is the most perfect type of propaganda is the kind that people can't spot. It's the scentless, like odorless, colorless brand that this country is founded on, that this country runs on, that it's powered by currently. The fact that the quote unquote pro-America sentiment is all ideology backed by propaganda, right?
It's the greatest lie the devil ever told was convincing people he doesn't exist. What's that fucking quote? But it's really just like that call's coming from inside the house.
Yeah, like exactly. And there's almost something like an incredible, like it makes your jaw drop. It's like almost awe-inspiring to live in a time and in a country where information is so readily available and you can find it, you can dig for it, but being so brainwashed into American propaganda that you won't look for it, or that you won't believe it, or that you will believe it's disinformation or propaganda itself. Like that, it's incredible. It's the reason why like great cults flourish. We're doing the same thing. It's the cult of America. It's smoke and mirrors, and it's so wild. And we've seen it transform with like Trumpism and like MAGA to be presented fact, black and white facts, and just say with your whole fucking chest, no, wrong, wrong, fake news. Like that right there is as McCarthy as you fucking get. Like that is as Red Scare, it's only American when I do it, First Amendment shit. Like that's it right there. And it's interesting to like have these moments of like look back perspective and go like, of course we're here. Of course this was going to happen. Like, look. And when we get into Reaganism, we're going to see everything that they were testing out, everything that the US government was learning from all of these other dictatorships and was copying. They were literally doing the whole copy, but change it up so you don't get caught. Like that's what we did. And we're going to see that taken to the next level with Reagan. And you can, without a doubt, 100% draw a line from shit that is like going wrong right now in your life, even personally, and then like as a country, as a people, as a class, whatever, to Reaganism. And then that goes from Reaganism to the Cold War. And it's like, it's just incredible. Like America, we thought the Industrial Revolution is where we leveled up. No, that was where we put like blood, sweat, tears, power, and muscle. True America came to rise during the Cold War and then into Reaganism. That's when we learned how to play the fucking game.
Do you want to know what I'm still bitter about?
What?
I used to be in this nerdy little academic club, and you would go from school to school and you would compete. And one of the competitions was you would get a topic and then present on it and debate it. And we got one of like select like a political regime on how you would run a country. And everybody was like, we got to do capitalism. We got to do capitalism. And normally, if you picked the hardest choice, you got points for that. And I was like, I think we should just pick communism and talk about like the redistribution of wealth and all that. And then the other team, woefully unprepared, you were supposed to make a poster and everything. On their poster, they just filled it in with the American flag. And they said, boom,
Yep.
America, we rest
Yep.
our case. And I was like, we fucking got this. We go up there and we break down all of the benefits of communism. We are citing the Book of Merlin by T.S. White about talking about how a society of ants is the most equally distributed, or like in terms of workforce, but how that since they all work towards the same goal. And it's not something where we're all fucking lions, or like we're not getting torn apart from the inside out by like a herd of lions. The judge went, I agree with everything you say, but can't argue about America. And the other team won by literally making an American flag poster. They hit none of the standards or whatever, and they fucking just won it. And I remember thinking, like, at the time I was so gooped, and I was like, I'm not even communist, but like the prompt said that we should not choose what we know and what's obvious. And the parameters of judging was to go down and make sure we hit every parameter and explained it in full.
Mm-hmm.
And we lost because of this propaganda ridden thing. And I wasn't even like into communism when I was younger. You know what I mean? When you're younger, you're like, I'm a Republican, like my parents.
I mean, I can't say that, but like, I know where you're coming from.
Well, yeah, I was born and raised in Utah. But I remember being like so fucking gooped. And I think about that now and then because my whole team, I remember them just being let down because they were like, why'd you tell us to do communism? And I was like, why didn't realize it was fucking Reagan up there, asshole.
Well, I mean, I was going to say that's almost a metaphor for modern day America, that like you can be the most well-prepared, well-spoken, well-educated, fact-based, clear and concise. But if you are not red, white, and blue, like you can go fuck yourself. And if there is a situation that you could cross in your life to give you the best, like literal explanation of how this country runs and functions, it's that.
Yeah.
So that's that. And hopefully we'll take a little fun breather before we get into Reaganism, which I think is going to be like a really hot, like, man, that just gets me like heated and juiced up to think about. So super excited for that. I know everyone was excited for us to end our religious era and surprise, shouty, we entered our war era. So you like that? Because I don't.
That's good.
Speaking of things that you can like, you can go to our Instagrams. We are at Go to Hell Podcast. I am at Noelle Fain. That is at Sithlard. And in all of those, you will find a link in all of our bios, and that link will open up into our Patreon. $1 gets you in, new episodes every week. It could also link you into our merch, where 100% of proceeds are donated. We also have some resources for donating to the cause in Gaza and Rafah and to the people of Palestine. We also have a link to Kelly Holloran or Wildwood Owl on Etsy. She makes cool shit for us, and she makes cool shit in general. Also, shout out to her especially for the little care package. We're going to try to, it's nothing in Utah is as cool as what you gave us, but like we're going to give you some fun little stuff back. So look forward for that, girl. Specifically you, not anyone else listening. And you can also find a link to our Discord server. And I don't know why you'd need it, but you can also find links to listen to us, which is anywhere podcasts are heard.
Hell yeah.
Oh, thanks for bearing with me as my brain fucking shorted out multiple times on
No,
this.
that was dope. You killed it. As usual, 10 out of 10.
I want to not thank my public education. And you know what, actually, before we go, I'm going to give a hail to, how can I say this? We think and thought that our public education was horrific and awful, as it is, as it was. But what I have learned from the internet is that there are a lot of states no longer teaching children how to read by sounding out letters. And
I saw that. Best guess reading.
Yes, they are learning how to read by memorization rather than sounding out. So they like don't know. Yeah, they don't know how to read. There are children going into 3rd grade, going to 5th grade who don't know how to read. Like actually read. What you'll hear us do, which I will do with my whole chest now, which is sound out words.
Yeah.
To figure it out. At least I will be able to get somewhere. Whereas kids right now in our fucking public schools are guessing. They're guessing based off of like memory cards and flashcards. And what's so weird is that like I remember seeing like a kid do this, like a younger kid, and like this is so Americana because I watched this kid who looked like too young to even speak or read nail these flashcards, right?
Mm-hmm.
Picture of an apple, it would say apple. They'd be like, apple, right? And I was like, damn, genius. No, idiot. Actual idiot. Because that motherfucker can't sound out apple. They just know based on memory that means apple.
Yeah.
So God forbid they see apple bees. They're not going to know what the fuck that says.
Yeah. Right?
So like, I just want to say hail to phonetics.
Yeah.
If you have a child right now, sound some shit out with them. There's a bunch of free resources on YouTube who are having to reteach/relearn or help children with phonetics. What was that shit? What was that fucking the cartoon that it would teach you about like phonetics and sounding shit out and fucking verbs and shit?
It wasn't Sesame Street?
No, bitch. It was like a cartoon.
I don't remember.
And they had the songs like conjunction, junction. What's your function? Yes. What's that?
Schoolhouse Rock?
Schoolhouse Rock. Find some fucking torrented versions of Schoolhouse Rock. Teach your kids how to sound shit out, man.
When I was teaching, we would do like, if I held up like the letter A, I would be like, A, A. That was like literally how we would teach. Or B, we'd be like, ba.
Mm-hmm.
B. And we'd be like, what's a B word? And then people would be like, my
children.
Breakfast. And we'd be like, let's find B words. And these were like 18-month-olds. And they would hear ba. And then they would go over and be like, book. Like, wow. And like, I'm sure that's also memorization. But then you'd be like, what's ba and book? And they'd be like, ba. And it was like constantly making it like hounding that in. So the fact that they don't teach that anymore.
It's crazy. Kids don't know how to fucking read, dude. Kids don't know how to fucking read. Also, Chelsea used to teach Montessori kids, which I learned is like the way. But what's the age that you like shouldn't do it anymore? Like it's not really working after that age?
I would stop probably at like 3rd grade, honestly.
3rd grade, yeah.
I would do, I think baby to 3rd grade might even be late. Maybe like even 2nd grade. I would stop only because Montessori was really good about teaching more worldly experience type stuff, like teaching phonetically like that. But I did 18 months to 2 years and that was just fine. But we would teach texture and things. So how to like really experience your natural environment. But in terms of like mathematics and stuff, I would move your kid to more of a like technical school that really hammers that shit down, unless they're not interested in it. And if they're interested in the arts and stuff, I guess it just depends on the kid.
Well, I think that like and you can look this up. but there's like a stat about all of like the modern day founders, like all of the modern day big founders and like unfortunately billionaires, all of them went to Montessori schools except for Steve Jobs, and then he put his children in Montessori schools.
I think it's good. I can definitely see it not being for everyone. They're also insanely expensive. So
they are, which is unfortunate. But I think that like there are a lot of these like critical everyday skills that like kids don't learn that like Montessori school would like get into them. And God, what was that like after school math place? Like what was it called? Like Kubo or something like that? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, with the little or cute.
What was it called?
It was like come on, but like KUMON.
Yes.
Yeah.
Something like that. Yeah. Take your kids to that too. We just really got to step it up, you know? Like,
yeah.
Fuck.
I hate to say it because I don't have kids, but you got to spend time teaching your kids this shit and you got to get on them about their grades. Find what they're good at and make them pursue that in a way where they can live a happy life.
Yeah, 1,000%.
So I'm going to say, hail us for keeping this podcast going. We are on episode 146.
Wow. Yeah. Big hail to us. I will say consistency we've been lacking. This is like the first actual Thursday we've recorded, which in a minute, which is usually the days that we record. But I also want to take that back and rescind that immediately because I think that's how we still appreciate and not burn out. Like when I sat with this information and digested it for like a few days and then wrote like 12 pages. And I was like, I could record this, but I think I need like another day or two to just like digest it all and give my brain a break. And that's just with our content. That's not even considering like, hey, we should allow ourselves some freedom. Like, I think the structure is what keeps you going and the routine is what keeps you going. But I also think that like, you should give yourself some wiggle room to be flexible, which I think we've done, which we haven't done in the past.
Yeah, I think in terms of like quality, some of the earlier stuff I listened to, and I'm like, I can like tell where in the episode I didn't write an ending, and I'm like, I forgot. Now let's make it up. And then there's times where you could probably hear us going, and that's the end.
Yep.
Like there's no more stuff. So no, this is a sick episode. My goal is to always stay on time and on the ball with everything. But sometimes that's really fucking hard because this takes a ton of work.
Yeah, and we'd like to give ourselves a minimum of 7 pages per episode. That's a minimum. We'd like to be more than that. So sometimes that takes time. And I appreciate us not pushing ourselves.
Size 10 font, single space, regular margins. So it does take a lot. And then it's also like a podcast of inspiration. And sometimes that's like creating art. You go through like an artist block and you're like, fuck, dude, what is there to talk about? But
yeah, I very much feel that as well. So, and also another reminder, if you have ideas, send them to us on Discord. We'll for sure cover them. So, okay, let's get the fuck out of here.
Okay, bye.
Bye.